I think it's day 6. Not sure. I'll go back and check the titles of the other ones. Doing a fair bit better today than I was yesterday. Not 100%, but it seems to have tapered off or eased up a little bit for a day at least. And I don't feel quite as exhausted. And part of that is I got more calories in. I sort of did a binge last night. And my body doesn't like getting more food than it can handle in one go. But when I wasn't getting enough calories in my diet, if I don't get enough food in, I also get sick. So part of that was, as much as I knew I was going to lose everything I ate, getting as much through that absorbs quickly, some of that I think helped pull through. So doing better. I posted to, keep wanting to call it LiveJournal now, Tumblr. I posted to my Tumblr page. I posted the elevator pitches for the 3 stories I'm working on. There's a part of me that just wants to play around and write 7 short stories, but maybe I'll hold off to do that till the second round of fiction, which will be 2 months from now. I did get a little distracted today. One of the things that in the last 24 hours, I've eaten a little more than I usually do and gotten a little more adventurous than I usually do. But I cooked up a slice of tilapia. And actually what I did first was I cooked up a batch of sliced cucumber. If you've never had cooked cucumber, I recommend it. I've been doing that for years now. It's one of the big staples of my diet. And then some zucchini and squash noodles. And I was going to put in some spinach, but I didn't get to that one yet. I think I have a bag of baby spinach in the fridge that's I thought I was going to use, but it's not really in usable condition. So I have to get another bag of or batch of or something of it. And then, but the cucumber and squash, put the cucumber in the pan first, let it cook up enough so that a lot of the water comes out, and then throw in the squash noodles and zucchini noodles, and let the juices from those mix, and let the water from the cucumber cook into the squash while also cooking some of the flavor out of the squash. And when you're all done, you pull all of that out of the pan and you let it drain in a dish and pour off the extra water, or I guess it's just juice at that point, and then used that broth to cook my fish in. And as it got down to about half the volume, and it was a frozen fish, so it's thawed out of the fish that one side was starting to cook sufficiently, I flipped it and introduced some wasabi, some pickled ginger, and some soy sauce into the vegetable broth that it was cooking in, and cooked that down a lot further, to the point where the fish was done. I broke it apart into flakes and served up some of the vegetables on the side. And by then it was a thickened broth, and I poured some of that over the vegetables with a little bit of salt, because it wasn't particularly strong. It was like a tablespoon of soy sauce for a huge batch of what I made. And so I added some salt to it, and that was tasty. But by far, the fish was delicious. It was incredible. So clearly it had some, either in general it tastes really good, which is possible. It's distinctly possible that it's just a nice taste. But I would also say there's a good chance that my body was definitely missing something. And so getting that in my system was like, that was a a wonderful thing to have. So I'm doing a bit better tonight. I'm not as tired, which I think that's down to what I did last night, where I posted my short story, novella, and novel elevator pitches on Tumblr, and then I ate I think 10 marshmallow peeps. And it's just pure whipped sugar and a little bit of protein. And I know it, but it's also calories. And I think my body just didn't have enough calories getting into it. And that stuff, I mean, pure simple calories at that point was enough to help me feel a little bit better. So I think I mentioned earlier, when I get sick like that, my body just doesn't. I'm not using the new laptop yet. I haven't installed anything in it yet. There's a little bit of neuroses involved with that. It's a nice new pristine laptop. I can actually grab the new laptop and show it to you if you want. But it's pristine, and it's not choked. It's not stressing itself with trying to pull off certain things. Like, I don't want to push it too hard yet. So I'm trying to figure out, what do I really need to do with it? And at this point, what I'm doing mostly with this computer works. I mean, it's decent for the live updates. Now, speaking of updates, I just had the computer shut itself down and reboot. Annoyingly, I hate when it does that. But it did an update, so I'm wondering if perhaps it's fixed whatever glitch causes it to freeze when I try to adjust this web camera. But other than that, I might just see if I can install the information for this web camera on the other laptop and have that be the first thing I try and do with the other laptop. I'm not sure. Are you noticing any kind of visual or auditory problems? Because I mean, this webcam is pretty much going to give you the same result no matter what I put it on. Okay, so this webcam is going to look pretty much the same. I think the only thing that's going to be different, see if I can aim it here, is the fan on this, down here, makes a heck of a lot of noise. And that might lead to a little bit of sound in the background. And it might give a little irregularity to not a feedback, but a little something to the video feed. I'm not sure. I do feel like I want to see if I can try to do an external mic for better audio quality. But that's an investment that's on the back burners till I get other things worked out. I did get my taxes done, and it's not much, and I have some outstanding debts that I need to take care of right now to some friends and family members who have made it possible for me to achieve certain things in the last month or so by being forgiving of like regular payments I would make them for compensation for things they're doing for me. But yeah, I mean, I think I could probably find, I think I have somewhere, I have a lav mic. I didn't have great results on the last computer, so the one before this one. I plugged it in and there was a lot of signal noise in the midst. So I don't know if that was just the last computer's mic jack being buzzy when the computer fan was running, or what. I don't think I ever tried it on this one. And I could try it on the new one and see if it makes any difference. And I think with those going, I don't think there's going to be a noticeable difference. But I do think for my regular edited content that I want to get started before the start of the week, I think there is definitely a possibility that I will try this webcam as the primary camera, especially if I can adjust the white balance, because this is aggressively washing out my complexion. Like I know I've been sick for a week, but I don't think I'm that pale. And I'm definitely not this pale. And so there's something I need to do to adjust that. But so I mean, if I can adjust the settings on this one now, I might do that. I do want to see if I can set up a green screen behind me. I don't think I'm ready yet to take full advantage of it for my backgrounds. And I haven't got the lower third art worked out yet, or some of the side information spots worked out yet. But I mean, I could hold out forever until I get that worked out, or I can just do something not quite there yet, but better than this, and improving each time I go. I think that makes more sense, and so I can't keep holding out for the ideal circumstances. I gotta just go with the flow. But with the writing, I think I really, there's a part of me that got into the idea of talking about, I think I talked about it the other day, where I did, years ago, I did write a short story a day for 30 days. And I did it, and I enjoyed doing it. And I have a lot of short stories. I would say about a third of those short stories turned out to be the introduction to a much longer story. And so I don't know if I would call them short stories anymore. But I would kind of enjoy maybe doing a short story a day for a 7-day week. Now, I'm probably going to end up doing that not this month, and next month's food through health and fitness. So the next time around would be, this is April, that would be May. So June 1st, I might write a short story a day. And then, I mean, that's just kind of fun. I've stuck mostly to longer form fiction over the last couple decades, just because some of the story ideas that I want to talk about are not suited to short form. They're something you have to build up to, experience, and then sort of ruminate on, and then figure out how you feel about the resolution of it. And you can do that in a short story, but it's less rare to get a deep thought in a short story that, I mean, you could. It'd be tricky. But, you know, the nature of the choice of social pressure versus quality of life and health, that's not a light topic. And so that's sort of like the theme of the novel length that I'm working on now, is just sort of like, to do that in short form would be too quippy, too punchy, and leave a lot unsaid, and take some of the power out of the experience. Like, for when writing a story, the experience of the character should be powerful. It should be something that I'm thinking of, and it touches me in a certain way. I should phrase that differently. It touches on a part of my life and the values that I hold. And then I'm communicating those things to you. Now, communicating them in 3 pages or 5 pages is me telling you a thing. It's not me using words to help you experience something in a deeper way. And I feel like longer form benefits from that better. Now, I mean, you could write a script for a movie that would be a 3-hour movie of a young couple experiencing what it means to struggle and be together, and what it means to reach a point in their lives where ultimately one of them's left alone. You could write a 3-hour movie on that, and it would still feel like condensing it a lot. But Pixar did it for their opening to Up in a way that conveyed all the feelings. But you'll notice in that format, in the Pixar opener for Up, it's all montage, and there's no dialogue. So there's no time for a conversation. And while you do get to value and appreciate the characters in that opening montage, you're not really there along with them. And so, like, it conveys the emotion, and it does it better than most things I've ever seen. But trying to do that with a short story, like, you could do that, but it's more like a recap of a history than a story at that point. You're not there with the characters, you're not experiencing it. It's sort of like a, once upon a time there was this character who did this, 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 and this, struggled through most of his childhood, and so on and so forth. And it's like, it's rushed, and it can be used to condense down an important point and establish a beginning. But if the entire Pixar movie was a Pixar short, with that first 4 minutes, 5 minutes of that movie, I think it would punch hard, leave you sore, and then that's sort of it. There's no sort of like, it was used in Pixar's movie Up to establish an experience of the main character. I'm losing you over and over again tonight. It's used to establish the origin of the character for you to then take that established character type and see what he becomes after that. So as the older man progresses through Up, you're not really starting from a fresh character's point of view. Like the little boy, he's fresh. He's your fresh character. But what they did for that early part of Up was give you a chunk that made it so that you are revisiting a character you know without having to spend half an hour building that character up to then change them through the course of the rest of the movie. Like, they just hit you full out, condensed version of who he is, makes you feel all the feels and know where he is at that time, and then see where he grows through the movie. But doing it independently, like a standalone montage written fiction, just I don't know that there's a way to make that work too well. You could probably pull it off for 1 or 2 types of stories, and it would be a fun experiment to see if it could be done. But yeah, a lot of those writing projects that I want to do are the bigger, longer ones that need to be pulled out. It's that early part of Pixar's Up told that story told full out to experience it all and not have it recapped for you on a short blurb. And so I need the longer form fiction for that. For the novella, that one is a little bit easier to do. Like the main character there is going to feel less deep and less full because he's just a schmo. He's just a guy. And, you know, how he got to be who he is today won't tell you anything that you can't just observe by his interactions in the story. And so the real crux of the novella is what would this average schmuck do in this circumstances, and what are the consequences of an average schmuck doing that? And the other main character of that story is the setting itself. What's changing in a world? How do we all change as a world in response to the circumstances? So it's like the everyday schmuck as an individual, how do they handle what's happening in the world? But then how does the world handle what's happening in the world? And how both of those don't necessarily agree on what the right course is. And that's more where I want to play with that one. And that one, because it's not character exploration as much, it can be a shorter story. And the walkaway points, the things that are meant to leave you thinking and feeling about it, are going to be, here's the world and what's going on, here's the character, his place in it, and here's what happens at the end. It's really going to be more about like getting from point A to point B, whereas the novel version is the journey along the way. Now the short story, that's really more of a procedural gimmick. That one's really just playing on the standard, somebody's been kidnapped, go figure out how to find them and rescue them. But the person who's been kidnapped is you. The person who's finding that person is you. And the hunt for clues is done through like a cell phone. And so like that gimmick to that classic trope, like we don't even have to know like what the childhood of the main character was like. We don't have to know who he loves as a musician. We don't have to know his favorite food. I mean, if I wanted to, I could throw in little bits like, God, I'd give anything for a nice steaming cup of coffee right now. Just one little statement, and it adds a little bit of flavor to the story, but it's not necessary. The goal is somebody was kidnapped. Where are they? And how do you get to them? And how do you save them? And how did they get where they are? Why are they there? Like those questions, those are the things you answer through the problem solving that's done through the phone. So, I mean, it's really just more like ask a question, try to figure it out, ask another question, try to figure it out. And that's easy enough to do in a very short bit. So there's different styles fit different types of stories, different explorations of concepts. So I still favor the long form right now because so many of my thoughts and ideas tend to be, what does this mean for the future of humanity? and what is this experience like for the individuals who go through it. And those are never short, simple topics to explore. But yeah, so tonight the hope is to get the, I mean, I guess it's a little silly to call them book blurbs, but like the back cover. Let's see if I got the example here. All right, so there's that. So we've got on the back here of one of the ones I'm reading soon, this little paragraph and a half here. I guess that's what you'd call it. That would be what you would want for at least the novella. For the novel, you might want two full-size paragraphs, possibly 3 smaller paragraphs. But for the short story, like I sort of like tricked myself into thinking like, oh yeah, we'll just call them book blurbs for each of them. For the most part, short stories really don't have a book blurb. They don't have a back cover. They don't have the dust sleeve doesn't have a inside liner to tell you what the story's about. But in short story anthologies, where they introduce short stories, one of the things they'll oftentimes do is, you know, it's 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph is the history of the author and where you can find more of their works. And the other paragraph is where the idea for the story came from and what to expect from the story. And so that's sort of what I'm aiming for, is that for the short story, this little guy for the novella, and then something a little more like the dust sleeve blurb. Let's see if I got an example of that here. Yeah, so in the case of like this one, the cuckoo's egg, the description here is substantially more. So there's a little bit more there to do for that. And that's sort of the 3 things I want to try to do tonight before bed. And then tomorrow, I'm going to see if I can do a full outline for each of them, or as much of an outline as I'm willing to share, to preserve some of the enjoyment of reading them when they're done. I don't want to spoil anything. But as much as, like I think I mentioned before, when I write things and when other authors do some writing, the first draft never looks like the final draft. So part of the fun of it is being able to hint and suggest at things that once you read the actual finished story, you go back and go, oh, that's what he was thinking there. It didn't happen in the story, but I can see where he was going with that. Like, that could be fun to do. It's sort of like the art of doing a trailer, a teaser. Sort of. Teasers tend to be a little bit more on the line of the book cover and the dust jacket blurbs. Now, once I do that, I can probably write the short story relatively quickly. I am going to be occupied Sunday, however. And I don't know when I'll be back. But Sunday, I believe, would be the last day of this batch. Probably. Because I didn't really get started. Like, Sunday, this past Sunday, was more of a summary of previous things. This month started, didn't it start on a Monday? feel like that's what it did. Yeah, Monday. So I'm considering this sort of like being flexible either way on that, because I do like being able to start a new series on Sunday, but I don't think I got that quite right. I was still waiting for the laptop. I didn't really get any real progress going until Tuesday. All right, so that's sort of the plan. So Sunday, I think I'll probably post the first video for planning out what I'll do for a video this month, like a video project. And then next week after would be a game, a tabletop game. So I got to keep that in mind as I plan forward. I do think I might go back and, if I can pull it off right, I got to figure out what I'm going to script for the video this coming week. But I've fully gotten fed up with the animation that I was trying to do for the first project. I may just live act out the roles. And see if I can figure out a way to change a few things to make it work. But yeah, I could probably see if I can pull that off. It might be easier. I could probably get it done in a couple days at that rate. The animation's just taking months of work, and I'm ready to be done with it. But when I do that, I'm thinking I will probably just post a link to it here on YouTube as a separate video. But the excerpts from writing to Tumblr works really nicely for a lot of things. I think what I need to do is do the same thing for the board game design. So the instructions to the board game will go up there, and some simple board designs. It might be harder to do the cards. I don't know. Like, I can't remember the last time I printed out a deck of cards on cardstock, cut them out by hand, and how I felt about doing that. I always feel like they're very flimsy when you do it that way. But I may give that a go anyway. But the board game I should be able to do, and let people get it for free, and just put them. I need to set up a link to my. I need to set up my Patreon account so that if anybody wants to support the project by making donations there, they can do that. And then after that was the product, which I talked with somebody recently, and I guess there's an art market that's done every year towards the end of the year that expressed an interest in some of my like 10 or so, maybe 20 of those coaster tray sets. And then this, like the mukbangs, I'm not interested in necessarily doing that anymore. Science board games, I have had thoughts about some of those. They can be fun. I had you really have to find a good system of rules and gameplay, and you have to play test it a lot. Because the first thing you really want it to be is a game that people will like and play over and over again. I played a game with we have a playtest and prototyping board game design group that I host at our makerspace, and I have played a few games with some people that are fun games, and they're just making them for the fun of them. I don't think they ever have plans to go anywhere with them. I played some games with people who are making a small gaming business that way. And then I played a game with a guy who's a history teacher who built a game that is sort of like competing for world trade or something like that between historical figures and ships. And it could be a more fun game to play, but in tweaking the game so it's more fun to play, becomes less history focused, and that's not what he's doing with this game. And so I feel like you have a similar problem with science-based games. Like you're looking at science-specific games. Like it's you know, if you're doing something like chemistry, it's less about, you can't make it so that like, what happens when you combine this, this, and this, and it's like a flashcard turnover, and it tells you like the answer, and you get points for the answer. Like a Trivial Pursuit style game for science, you can make it work, and you can make it useful in a classroom environment to do that. No, it's, I mean, I think I'm not poo-pooing the idea or anything. It's something I've thought about doing too, is distinctly making games that teach you something useful and make it interesting to want to learn those things. And that's a tricky combination to pull off. A lot of the people out there who need to learn a thing, the learning of it isn't ever going to be fun for them. And trying to make a game of it just makes it one more homework assignment, I guess, sort of. It's, I don't know. I mean, there's got to be a way to do it. And I know I'm, if you can do it, I'd love to see it. I'm not saying you can't. You might be able to. You might be the one who has the perfect solution to this problem, and you just have to trust yourself to give it a try. But I know when I think about it, I'm like, I struggle. I bounce my head against it a lot and go like, if I want to do a game that teaches math skills, like, how do I do that? How do I do that right? Make it so that you want to come back to it and play it over and over again. Like, the closest I've come is I've been working on a design for a deck of cards. And my deck of cards originally started as a premise of helping learn how to learn. And so one of those things is in improving memory, there's a memory tactic called the major system, where you build a list of words that have, basically the technique is you take the numbers 0 to 9 and you ascribe to each one of them a consonant vowel, a consonant value. So 1 is T, and then I'm trying to remember what is 2. I believe 2 is N, 3 is M, 4 is R, 5 can't remember. Anyway, so that's one of the things I want to try to fix is, like, if you can make a game where each one of the cards has a value of 0 to 9, and instead of being numbered, they're lettered with the the consonant in the major system, it'll help you learn it faster. Somebody puts down a T, and you know that your R is going to be higher than their T. And so as you play games with that, you just internalize the knowledge that R is 3 higher than T. And so that's one thing I was playing with to do that. Oh, okay. But so where I was going with this is, like, when you learn the major system, you have the ability to use the letters to make words by, we don't count vowels when we do that. So a T and an R would be it would be like a that'd be 14. But if you put like, I'm trying to think of, like, TEAR would be 14, because you can put the E and the A in the middle, and because they have no numerical value, now you can remember 14 easily by thinking of tear. And so if you want to remember to get 14 pounds of salmon, you go to the grocery store and you picture salmon being torn. And so tear, salmon, you need 14 pounds. You don't need to write it down. This is a memory trick that lets you memorize long strings of numbers. People use it to memorize pi out to 100 places. And so, being able to do large strings of numbers is a great tactic. Now, playing a game where you can internalize the consonant value of the first 10 digits, 0 to 9, helps you do that better. Usually with the major system, they bridge it out to, okay, so then 11 would be TT, so you could spell tot, so like a tater tot or something like that. And that would be what you picture for the object for 11. And so for 2-digit, you're just basically taking the two consonants for the 1-digit versions of it and just making a new word image. And so you could say somebody tore the tot, and that would be 111. And so doing that and making a game to help learn that, I've struggled a little bit with it. Like, I'm just now composing the deck of cards. I've made it a little more difficult in the sense that with a deck of cards with 0 being the first one and not 1, you don't have a 10, so 0 takes place of the 10. So then looking at your deck of cards, you have Jack, Queen, King. You have 3 of those. If you look at a tarot card deck, they have Page, Knight, Queen, King. So you're going to have 4 in a suit, and 4 suits gives you 16. Of those 16, is there something that you can help memorize and learn that way? And so there's a tactic that some people use for geography and things like the periodic table, where trying to memorize that would be looking at the positions of things and trying to memorize that thing based on its location on a like a hashtag, a pound sign. Top right, top left, middle, middle row right, middle row left, middle, lower left, lower right, lower middle. Like you can do that, and that helps. And that's sort of one of the things that I want to, that's part of the reason why I get into, and I don't know if your messages are lagging and posting or not, but it's sort of one of the reasons why I want to build games that are educationally beneficial. Um, like finding a way to build a deck that lets you do those things, but also lets you play a series of all sorts of different kinds of games. Um, like geometry, mathematics. Like I really feel to a certain degree some of that is not as hard as we make it, because I can remember when I was younger feeling like I was an idiot because I just couldn't understand the mathematics and stuff like that. I left there thinking, I'm not good with languages, I'm not good with math, I'll never be good at those things. And then a couple times in my life where I was working after I left school, I encountered some things in science fiction novels when I want to understand that better. Then I'd go over and do the research myself, and I learned things like about how the structure. I mean, I can't speak or write in Sumerian cuneiform, but I understand more of it than most people ever understand. I looked into Egyptian hieroglyphs. I looked into learning more of Mandarin Chinese, and I learned a little bit of I learned a little Greek because I had a coworker that I wanted to try to learn new phrases for, and like I learned these things in 15, 20 minutes a day for a week or two, and like this is after years of school mathematics and over a year of studying languages. I did 3 different languages in school, and I don't retain any of it. Whereas I can still remember certain things in Mandarin. I can remember things I taught myself in an hour and a half about non-Euclidean geometry and 4th dimensional geometry. I can't remember anything they taught me in high school mathematics. None of it stuck. They didn't teach it in a way that was meaningful and useful to me. And I feel like if there was a way to make it fun and meaningful, and games are a good way to do that. I don't have as much struggle with sciences, because I'm a science fiction nerd, and I grasped onto that really quickly when I was younger. And so it's sometimes hard for me to realize that, oh, people don't understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about certain things, because it's just not it's not where their brains go. Mine automatically adapts to a lot of that stuff pretty quickly. Computer coding, not so much. I have to work on that one a little bit too. But and that's why, like the card deck that I've been playing around with building, it uses classical learning boosters, the Memory Palace, the geographical and graphical memorization forms, the major system, and the sort of rhyming or other tricks, and includes them in a deck that you can do things like play games of Uno with, or dominoes, or chess, or other classic games. I have issues a few times with like I can usually let some things go, but it's funny the things I can't let go. Like it's not always like I can accept things like faster than light travel. I can accept artificial gravity on a spaceship where they all orient their decks in a house-like structure. It doesn't really vex me greatly. But there are every now and then little things, little pet peeves that just set me off. And I'm like, no, that is totally illogical. But like, can I let it go for the story? Can I just, not think about it too hard? Just let it be for the story? It's like, all right. And I'm like, I think I mentioned this in one of the previous live streams, or maybe it was on one of the Viewsday nights where I watched a movie and I'm like, look, I understand that, like, I read fantasy novels too. Like, if I can accept dwarves and elves and magic swords and bows that fire bolts of fire, if I can let that go, I can let some of this science magic happen too. But for some reason, every now and then, there's one that just grinds into me and just, it's like, no! But yeah, that's just the inner nerd, and I think I have to get over it. I just have to get over it. Like, and I'm one who will readily come up with ideas of how to make, like, people talking about, like, in the Marvel movies, Thor's hammer. Nobody can pick it up unless they're the chosen one to do it. And everybody's like, well, if you had something that increased gravity, I'm like, it doesn't have to be that hard, guys. We could make this happen with current levels of technology. We could do this. And the way I would do this is Thor's hammer, don't make it heavier. Make it like, make a surface on it like the footprint of a gecko, and have a sort of like a release mechanism. So you might have like an inflator or a flexing membrane with a gecko's footprint on it, and you set that down anywhere and it sticks to a surface, and you can't remove it from that surface. You could pick up the table, but you couldn't pick up the hammer. And then with a recognition feature on that hammer, like a ring or a thumbprint recognizer or something to that effect, the right hand on that hammer could flex the membrane so that the microscopic hairs let go of the surface they're attached to. Now, with the size of the head of Thor's hammer, you have a surface area, like a gecko, a strip of like a gecko, synthetic gecko print about this big can hold over 200 pounds. So it's possible that you could build in the head of a Thor's hammer this big a flexible membrane that has a gecko's print on it that could hold 5, 6, maybe even 700 pounds of force. You could plant that on the side of a glass building and it would hold right there. That to me seems like the right way to do it. Not make it heavier, but make it grip to everything it's put on. And then, like, I saw well, I know that you can't bank like a jet in vacuum. Yeah. I also know that explosions don't make noise in space, and I'm willing to let go of that. That doesn't bother me so much. It's just down to the storytelling technique. Now, I mean, I could explain away some of that. Like, I can geek out a little bit and say some of the propulsion systems on the X-Wings and TIE fighters, clearly you can fly them over a planet and they have the same levitation effect that Luke's speeder had. on Tatooine. And so if they're using a field that somehow interacts with the magnetic field of a planet, or the solar magnetic storms in space, as if they're water, as a fluid medium, then you can get them to bank through space. You can get them to push against those fluids, magnetic fields, like they're a fluid, like an atmosphere or a fluid. Now, can you do something for explosions in a vacuum? I mean, I guess you can sort of rank it as somebody built optic sensors into the outside of your vehicle, and it reads the visible light radiation from an explosion, the different spectrums, as signals, and turns those signals into an auditory signal inside the ship. Maybe. And that's pushing it for me, though. It's pushing it a little bit. Sometimes you just got to let it be magic. Sometimes the wizard just has to do it. Yeah, it'd be fun to kind of just like go through all those geek moments and break them down as to why they don't make sense scientifically, and then try to make them work. How can we explain this away? How can we fix this? But yeah, like with the Thor's hammer, just knowing that, like, there was, I think is Smarter Every Day. There's a guy on there who did an episode of a guy near where he lives that built what he calls a Tesla cannon. And it's a handheld ray gun with a backpack that's water cooled, and it powers up this Tesla cannon that shoots out bolts of lightning that are relatively safe, but they're big, long arcs of lightning. And the arcs of lightning, if they lick back and catch you, they're not going to hurt you because of the difference between the amperage and the wattage. And I got to thinking, oh, I've got to find out how to make one of those. Because if I turn that little ray gun into a Mjolnir, a Thor's hammer, I could have a Thor's hammer that would shoot lightning bolts out of the top of it that would scare the crap out of anybody, but they'd be relatively benign and not hurt anybody. And if I could put it on the same hammer that I could make stick to anything with a gecko print, and I could put in a small taser into the hammer, so I could actually shock people in a way that hurts without hitting them with the full Tesla cannon. And if I could build something that could let me there's a way to do a ion thruster that can levitate small objects. And if you could figure that one out, that one would be the hard one. I don't imagine I would ever get to be able to do that. But there's another thing, too, that I thought was interesting, is if you can generate a plasma window, is what they call them. It's a membrane of plasma that will intercept particles and some energy spectrum stuff. And so it's sort of like a membrane of energy. It's almost a force field at that point. And I got to thinking, like, when you look at Thor swing his hammer and intercept like weapons fire and stuff like that, like, I think you might be able to build a plasma membrane over the surface of it. And I know enough about some metallurgy and some techniques to make a head on the hammer that could feasibly stop a bullet and not be super heavy. And so, like, it could stop bullets, it could stop energy blasts, it should be able to shoot lightning bolts, zap somebody, and stick to any surface I stick it to. I was like, that's as close as you could ever want to get to a Mjolnir, a real world equivalent of Mjolnir. And I'm like, I could have fun doing it. I actually have a series of projects at some point, if I ever get enough money and security, and like, so I don't have to work a full-time job. If I ever get to the point where I can just make whatever I want and I have a budget to afford to do big projects, I kind of want to do Hawkeye's bow. I want to do Thor's hammer. I would love to see what I could do with doing some of Iron Man's stuff. Could I do Captain America's shield? Could I do Wolverine's adamantium claws? Could I do a freeze ray, a flamethrower? Like the freeze ray could be like, what is it? Mei from Overwatch. Flamethrower is ubiquitous enough that I could do any number of characters for that. I mean, I would love to and like some of it's not like that. I like the sonic screwdriver would be fun to try to do something like that. I would love to try to do some of them will just be interesting to have do things. If you've ever seen Hellraiser, the Cube, I'm pretty sure using a few tricks and techniques of magicians and clockwork and stuff like that, I could reasonably approach getting a cube puzzle that does all the moves that you see in the first movie. Well, most of. I think there's one that just makes it impossible, but I might be able to find a way around it. But it's not going to open into a distant dimension of hell beasts or anything like that. It's just going to be a fun experiment to see if I can make one do more than one motion from the movie. And I'd love to do video game, movie, and other props to really function. I actually looked at, if you've ever seen Hayao Miyazaki's Warriors of the Wind or Nausicaa in the Valley of the Winds, they're both the same movie, but edited differently and titled differently. One was an American release that was butchered, and most fans are not a fan of it. But in that movie, there's a species of giant, they're almost like woodlouse, the ones that roll up into a ball, these giant bugs. And they go through the landscape, and they sort of look like a horseshoe crab too. So they got these segmented shells, these huge carapaces with like 14 or 20 some odd eyes on the front of it. And right underneath of that is a series of like crab-like legs. And all along the length of their body, they have these little horseshoe crab-like legs underneath. And I was looking at that and I was like, building the segmented body as a prop would be super easy to do. But I think if I take, there's a famous, I think it's Dutch artist who made Strandbeests. And these Strandbeests are these PVC pipe built works of art that are wind-powered walkers that use rows of like 15 legs. And the way he engineered those is really kind of neat. Taking those designs and tweaking them a little bit, I can get those little crab legs in the front and maybe even legs along the underside of the carapace of a giant remote-controlled Miyazaki's, they're called the Ohm, and they're key to the story of Nausicaa and the Valley of the Winds. Like, I would love to make one of those. I want to make a Boba Fett's helmet. Like, I'm looking at some of those, like the original Dune from 1980 or 81, had this thing in it that was the Hunter Seeker. It was a hypodermic needle that levitated. And honestly, my first thought when I look at that is go, there's a magnetic levitation desk toy that I could do that with. I could make this floating hypodermic. Now, I'm not going to make it launch at anybody, and I'm not going to fill it with poison, but like, I do kind of want to try to do some of these projects. I think it would be a lot of fun, and it may or may not get attention. I would imagine people would pay attention to that, but even if it didn't, like, I still want to do it. I'm a nerd down to the core, and I want to do those kinds of things. But and someday maybe I'll write a script for a movie or write a book that's popular enough that people want to make props from my stories. All right, that was me trying to bring it back around to the fact that tonight's supposed to be talking about writing, but I'm not going to hold it. I'm not going to hold myself to a pattern right now. All right, I will see if I can update my Tumblr with more detailed discussion of the stories and what they mean, and then tomorrow a more full-ish outline with maybe some key scenes sort of explained out. And then from there, I will probably proceed to write at a more casual pace. I will try to do what I can for the videos next week. So I will see you for that tomorrow. Just fun, interesting conversation tonight. Have a good one. No, give it a try.